From KGW News, this is Straight Talk with Laurel Porter.
Hello and welcome to Straight Talk. I'm Laurel Porter. The U.S. Senate is in the spotlight as President-elect Donald Trump announces nominees for his cabinet. The Senate is responsible for confirming appointees with a simple majority vote. Following the November election, Republicans will hold the majority in the next Congress, and the body rarely blocks presidential cabinet nominations, particularly from the same party. We have seen one nominee, Trump's pick for Attorney General Matt Gaetz, withdraw his name when he realized he wouldn't have the votes needed. Oregon Democratic Senator Ron Wyden is currently the chair of the Finance Committee, and with Democrats becoming the minority, he will be the ranking member in the new Congress. He's also a member of the Senate Select Intelligence Committee and a senior member of the Energy and Natural Resources Committee. What's his take on the incoming administration and Donald Trump's cabinet picks? How will he view his role on these important committees going forward? Plus, how will Trump's promise of hiking tariffs impact trade-dependent Oregon? We'll talk to Senator Wyden about that and some lighter issues, including the WNBA coming to Portland and his new book, It Takes Chutzpah. Welcome to my guest, Oregon Senior Senator Ron Wyden. Welcome back to Straight Talk. It's so nice to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
As President President-elect Trump's administration comes into view and starts to take shape, what are your thoughts about what the next 4 years are going to be like?
The big issues are going to be costs, and that's really what the election was about. Costs and prices. When I have my town hall meetings, I've now had more than 1,100 of them. The second word is almost always bill. It might be medical bill, it might be housing bill, it might be energy bill. That's what people are thinking about now. And for example, I'm going after these rate hikes. I'm trying to put the brakes on these PGE rate hikes. We're talking about more than 40% since just a couple of years ago, since 2021. And there are a lot of unanswered questions, but at least I know that I'm responding to what citizens say at my town hall meetings, what the emails say, what the texts say. People, the first and foremost priority is lowering their costs.
Well, let's talk about the PGE bills and those rates going up. You have written a letter to the CEO of PGE, Maria Pope, asking questions about why these hikes are going into effect. What's your biggest concern, and do you think you can stop these rate hikes?
Well, there's another one that is being looked at that the reality is these rate hikes are just hitting Oregonians like a wrecking ball. If you're a small business person, you're a family who's working at home, you're divorced, you're taking care of kids, you just can't make these rate hikes sustainable on your budget. And what I'm doing is focused on trying to get them some relief. The questions that I've asked, for example, are what kind of tax breaks does PGE get in return for these rate hikes? And we're going to stay at it until we stop them because they're out of hand.
There has been a lot of hand-wringing amongst the Democrats about what went wrong, what led to the stinging defeat for Democrats. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, remember, it was less than 1% in terms of the popular vote. And remember that here in Oregon, we elected a lot of moderate Democrats, the kind of folks that I really like to work with and who are part of what I call the Oregon way. So clearly, you've got to do a review after an election like this. But as I indicated with this PGE letter, I'm focused on the things people are talking about in their living rooms and kitchens.
What about, so about 40%, 41% of Oregonians voted for Donald Trump and over 55% voted for Vice President Harris. What do you say to those folks who voted for Harris, who may be feeling discouraged, maybe fearful and uncertain about the future? What do you say to them about the way forward?
Well, I think we focus on issues that really help people. For example, today I was also working on Medicaid. I mean, we're going to spend $4.5 trillion on health care in this country. One of the best ways to proceed is to have innovative approaches. Oregon is looking, for example, it's saying in Medicaid, if somebody is really sick and they're on the street, they'd have a chance in a medical crisis to get some help with their housing. That's going to give them a chance to get back to work, to get healthy again. I don't think that you have problem convincing people who are Democrats or Republicans or anywhere on the political spectrum that that's a smart approach.
Let's talk about some of these cabinet picks, and I should mention to our viewers we're taping this early in Thanksgiving week, so things could change. But I just want to go through a couple of these
Sure.
and get your take. But let's start with Oregon's own Congresswoman Lori Chavez-Dreamer, who narrowly lost to Janelle Bynum in Oregon's 5th Congressional District. Donald Trump has tapped her to be Labor Secretary. What do you think of that?
Well, my sense is, first of all, she's an Oregonian, so I'm going to listen very carefully to what she has to say. The reality is Donald Trump has not gone out of his way to be a big ally, for example, of working families and labor. Let's see how she can turn that around if confirmed. And certainly as an Oregonian, I want to see folks from our state have a chance to get a real hearing, and I'll be listening carefully.
How about Senator Marco Rubio as Secretary of State?
I've sat next to him literally one seat away on the Intelligence Committee for a number of years now. We've worked on a lot of bipartisan projects, particularly cracking down on some China surveillance. Data brokers are getting some of the access to our soldiers' data, and Senator Rubio and I have teamed up to crack down on that sort of thing. So I'm going to listen to him as well, but he certainly brings a lot of credibility from the Intelligence Committee.
So you think he'll get confirmed?
We'll see, but he's certainly in a strong position.
You are chairman right now of the Finance Committee, which oversees the House subcommittee. You'll be the ranking member come next Congress. What are your thoughts about Robert F. Kennedy Jr. as the Health and Human Services Secretary?
Well, I've certainly agreed with him on some issues. Tobacco control would be one example. I was the one who blew the whistle on the addictiveness of nicotine. He's made some outlandish statements. I mean, certainly this question, there's never been a safe vaccine. I think a lot of parents would not agree with that, given the fact that those vaccines in a lot of instances help their kids. We'll see how he does.
Do you think that these cabinet appointments will go through the traditional process? There won't be recess appointments trying to get through some of these more controversial ones?
Well, I want Oregonians to know I won't stand for something that throws out the window advice and consent, because that was something that the founding fathers really thought was central in terms of accountability and transparency. We're not going to go along with something that just turns the United States Senate into doormats.
President-elect Donald Trump campaigned on a pledge to raise tariffs on goods imports coming into the United States, 10% on all goods, up to 60% for goods coming from China. Oregon is one of the most trade-dependent states in the nation, I think exporting around $30 billion.
One out of 4 of our jobs revolve around international trade, and the trade jobs often pay better than do the non-trade.
So how did these tariffs impact Oregon?
They have huge implications for us. And one of the reasons that people say, well, I like these tariffs, is that they think that China, for example, is going to pay them. That's just factually wrong. China is not going to pay these tariffs. Our consumers who are paying for food and essentials, they're going to pay the tariffs. And the reality is there are some tariffs that can make sense in terms of protecting our companies when China and others are cheating. There are other tariffs that don't make sense, and I'm going to make sure that Oregonians get a fair shake.
President-elect Trump has said that the tariffs would make American goods more competitive. Do you think it'll work?
I think in a lot of instances what it's going to do is raise prices for Oregonians. That could contribute to more inflation. That's the last thing we need. There's some instances where a tariff carefully targeted can protect Oregon workers and Oregon companies, but we ought to be very careful about these across-the-board tariffs. They've been promised somehow as tariffs that would be paid for by China. That is just not true.
Let me ask you about the Bipartisan CHIPS Act. It's meant to revitalize the U.S. semiconductor industry, and it really is something the Biden administration has seen as a crowning achievement. However, Donald Trump has said that he would want to roll back a lot of the measures that were passed under President Biden. Do you think the CHIPS Act will survive the next administration?
It has to, because this is so important to our competitiveness. Technology is essential. I wrote the investment tax credits, the more than $20 billion package that's being used to really ignite manufacturing in Oregon and across the West. We just can't let China beat us in the competition business, and those legislative efforts are important.
I want to turn our attention to foreign policy, and the conflict between Ukraine and Russia seems to have ratcheted up a lot. In a major change in U.S. policy, President Biden authorized Ukraine to use these U.S. missiles called ATACMS. They're Army tactical missile systems that can reach far into Russia. Do you support that change in policy, allowing Ukraine to use those missiles?
Well, first of all, I want Oregonians to know why our involvement is critical. My parents fled the Nazis in the 30s, not all got out. We understand what dictators are all about, and I think to just walk away and let Putin do what he wants throughout that region would be a big mistake. We can have debates about various kinds of weapon systems, and I'm certainly going to ask for a review as a member of the Intelligence Committee when we get back, but on the fundamental proposition of is this in the security interest of Oregonians and Americans, my view is that you cannot let Putin just run wild there.
The president-elect has said that he can end this conflict between Ukraine and Russia on day one. He hasn't said how. What do you think happens next? What do you think should happen next?
Well, he often wakes up in the morning and says that he's going to end something, and then we often see that it's a lot more complicated than that. We all root for the United States with respect to national security, and I'd like to see his plan.
How do you see the conflict ending? President Putin is making a lot of very serious threats, implying that he would use nuclear weapons.
It ends when we build allies that can isolate him. Right now, we haven't been able to isolate him. He ends up getting help from various countries around the world. Isolating him is the key to ending this in a favorable way.
And what about the conflict between Israel and Hamas? How do you see that conflict being resolved?
We have to get the humanitarian aid in. We've got to get the hostages out. And we clearly have to have some kind of ceasefire, a period of time when we can talk, for example, about longer-term approaches, a two-state solution. I've not been a supporter of many of the policies of Bibi Netanyahu. He's stalled with respect to a ceasefire. We've got to get that and get it quickly to have the negotiations for a broader approach.
There's been some speculation that Netanyahu and Israel will ratchet up the conflict between now and the time that Trump is inaugurated in this lame duck Congress, and then as a nod to Trump, call a ceasefire after the inauguration. Do you think that's going to happen?
That doesn't sound very plausible to me. I mean, what I think is more likely is we'll continue these discussions. There has been discussions just in the last day or two of various approaches with respect to a ceasefire. That's the only way we're going to get serious talks with respect to serious solutions like a two-state solution.
Back here at home, you're working hard in Congress on an issue you are passionate about, getting wilderness designation for the Oahe Canyon lands in eastern Oregon. You've created a bill after years of negotiation with stakeholders, and now time is running out in this lame duck session to get something over the finish line before the new administration comes in. Meanwhile, eastern Oregon Republican Congressman Cliff Bentz has his own bill in the House that has some differences. Do you think you're going to be able to work out your differences in time to get this passed by the end of the year?
I'm certainly going to try. I mean, the reality is we need to protect the ag way of life in Malheur County, and we need to protect our treasures. I worked with ranchers and environmentalists and hunters and conservationists for years to put together a good bill. We got all these groups to sign a letter to the Senate saying that they were on board. Now there are some members of the House of Representatives who want to make fundamental changes from that couldn't get the votes in the Senate. So I've been talking to the congressman. We're working in good faith. We are not there yet, but I'm going to do everything I can to move it.
Now, there's discussion that President Biden could also declare the area a national monument instead, but you would rather see the wilderness designation. Why?
Laurel, you cannot pass wilderness legislation through a monument. You have to do it with black letter text passed by Congress. So you can't get wilderness legislation unless the Congress passes it. You can't get rid of it unless the Congress passes it. That's a key part of what we're working on.
What do these canyon lands mean for eastern Oregon?
Well, back east, they call it kind of Oregon's version of the Grand Canyon. These are treasures. And all over this state, I've just met with a bunch of tribal members, and they talked about how important this was to them. This is something where if we do it right, and after 50 years of gridlock on this, we can bring ranchers, the tribes, environmentalists together. That's how we got it out of the Energy and Natural Resources Committee that I sit on. Got a strong vote there, and we're going to keep pushing till we get it done.
I want to let seniors know, too, that the Medicare open enrollment is going to be ending soon on December 7th, and you want seniors to be really careful about scammers. Tell us what they should be concerned about.
Well, the first thing they ought to do is, if they have any questions, talk to their family members over this Thanksgiving holiday. I mean, everybody's going to be together, families will be together. The seniors have earned those benefits. They are not some charitable grant or something, and they've got a lot of questions, particularly when these fast-talking agents try to sell them multiple policies. I've gotten some restrictions on those, so if they have questions, they can call my office, they can call the state health insurance program, and most of all, talk to family.
And we have put a phone number up on your screen now. If you have any questions or concerns, you can call this number. Again, open enrollment ends on December 7th. What are some of the things happening in Oregon that Senator Wyden is excited about? What gives him hope? And It Takes Chutzpah. That's the name of his new book. We'll talk about that after the break. Welcome back to Straight Talk. I'm Laurel Porter, and we are talking with Oregon Senator Ron Wyden. Thanks again for being here.
Thank you.
Well, let's talk about some of the things that you're excited about happening in Oregon. And you announced that you have a big win for Coos Bay. The U.S. Department of Transportation awarded $25 million to the Port of Coos Bay to modernize the port. What does that mean for the South Coast?
And there was a second grant of, again, a substantial sum of money. This is a great shot in the arm to southwestern Oregon. They've been hit so hard ever since the changes in the timber industry and the natural resources sector. And this is a chance to add port capacity, which is a chance to be part of a whole Western effort to expand trade. All over the West, we need more port capacity. This is going to be particularly good because it's going to get a lot of heavy trucks off the road, so it's going to be an environmental winner as well.
So not just good for the South Coast, but also for all of Oregon, it sounds like.
All over the Northwest. We've got a real shipping shortage, and this is a chance to have a chance to build up port capacity. Something
else I know that you're super excited about. Let's take a listen. We'll see if you remember this.
Folks, what a day. Red City is now a WNBA city.
How excited were you to make that announcement that the WNBA is coming to Portland?
Well, let's also remember that we beat out Philly, we beat out Charlotte. People are looking for kind of good news about our state. That's a pretty serious win. We do a lot of things well in our state, but women's sports is right up at the top of it. We brought the commissioner out, Kathy Engelbert. She went to the sports bra in Northeast Portland over on Broadway, and the house was packed, and she walked out, and I said, Commissioner, what do you think? She said, never seen anything like it. So I knew that we were going to get a team at that point. Then a few months later, she wrote a letter describing what needed to be done in terms of practice facilities and the like, and we were off to the races.
So when does the team take the court?
2026.
And any thoughts about a name?
Well, I'm not going to be in the name business, but let me tell you what it means for Portland. I think what families will do in 2026 is they will go to the sports bra, for example, for burgers and sodas and beer and stuff like that in the day. Then walk down to Moda for the game. That'll also fill the stadium in the summer, which is often not filled with seats. And then we'll have, on the next day, we'll have a big Thorns game. So Saturday will be basketball, Sunday will be the Thorns.
So what do you think it means for women's sports in general?
Well, we're going to be hooping in Hermiston, rebounding in Portland, dribbling in Dundee. I'm kidding, but the reality is that's what people tell me. They're really excited, and especially for women's sports, because the Ducks and the Beavers have had great teams, great coaches. They were at the sports bra, and this is going to be a huge shot in the arm for our state.
Well, when we talk about sports and a big swing, we're hearing a lot about Major League Baseball.
Wouldn't it be great to have a 1-2 punch? And it sounds like our new mayor is talking about having a really good shot, and it's high time. Baseball and basketball, I'll take it, the two Bs.
Yeah, and then we've got soccer. I mean, it really is an exciting time for Portland. Well, you have a new book coming out, and talk about being a leader during these turbulent times. You've written a book, comes out on January 14th. We're taking a look at it here. It's called It Takes Chutzpah, How to Fight Fearlessly for Progressive Change. For Oregonians who might be feeling a little bit overwhelmed right now, what can they learn from your book?
Well, it's about how to get stuff done. You know, the reality is the typical book by a member of Congress is a little bit of bragging and then they announce they have an exploratory committee for president or something like that. Well, I don't need an exploratory committee to go to Silverton or something like that. You know, I'm working for Oregonians, and this is about getting things done. And so we talk about healthcare, we talk about energy costs, we talk about jobs. This is about being willing to think bold, to be audacious, and no matter what field you're in, you can be bold and make a difference in your world and for the broader world. One of the examples that I give at the beginning is Steve Prefontaine, the great runner from Coos Bay, who everybody thought couldn't possibly be a star. There he was, the face of worldwide running, and then all of a sudden we have a big stadium devoted to him in Eugene.
So for people who don't know, I mean, chutzpah is a Yiddish word, right? What does it mean?
It means audacious, it means bold, it means gritty. It's the kind of thing that you see with somebody like Steve Prefontaine, because I wanted to have an Oregon symbol. But if you're in the Girl Scouts, if you're a teacher, if you're a healthcare worker, we give you lessons, for example, never miss the unexpected moment, play the long game, don't waste your capital when you've had momentum. So we have something called Ron's Rules of Chutzpah, and give people for some direction no matter what their way of life is.
Well, give us some ideas of some of the rules of chutzpah.
Well, never miss an unexpected moment. For example, when the tobacco hearings were held, everybody thought it was pretty much over after about 5 hours. And I said, I'm not sure you made the key point. So I asked the staff, has anybody asked these executives if nicotine is addictive? And nobody had asked. I asked the question, and it was really that evidence that helped lead to a settlement of hundreds of billions of dollars to help people recover from smoking.
What are some of the other rules? Give us a preview of your book.
Well, playing the long game, for example, on energy, the clean energy tax credits that I was able to get passed, that had been stalled out for decades. I mean, it really went back to Richard Nixon 50 years ago. They talked about climate change and carbon fees and cap and trade and the like. Well, I found in 2010 that it was completely stalled out. So I said, we're going to throw the tax code, or as much of it as we could, in the garbage can, and we got it passed, and now Oregon has battery operations and all kinds of clean energy businesses.
How can you use chutzpah for positive change? People looking for ways that they can make a difference right now in their own communities.
Well, I think if you go, for example, to City Hall or a school board meeting, and you know we have lots of issues at school board meetings, and this is an ideal way to say, this is what we need for our kids. Let's try something different. My business would be glad to help here in the school district, whether it's the school district, the state legislature, or the Congress. Gritty, innovative approaches that everybody said, I'm not sure we can make it work. That's what I'm talking about.
Well, your book comes out on January 14th. Going back to DC now in these times, how would you describe the mood right now in Congress?
The mood is open to approaches that fix government. I don't disagree with the point that conservatives made that there's a lot of stuff about government that doesn't work. But I don't want to, for example, roll back the clock on Medicare and Social Security. I don't want to have the ultra wealthy be exempt from any sort of tax reform program. I want a tax code, Laurel, as the senior Democrat on the committee, that gives everybody in America the chance to get ahead, but I don't think ultra-wealthy people should be exempt from paying a fair share of taxes.
Do you think entitlements, as they're called by some, Medicare, Social Security, are in jeopardy?
First thing we have to do with healthcare costs is take on the middlemen. For example, when we go back, I'm going to be going after the PBMs, the pharmaceutical benefit managers. These are middlemen that are jacking up pharmaceutical costs for Oregonians in every corner of the state. So the first thing you need to do with the healthcare programs is go after these middlemen.
Well, Senator Wyden, I want to thank you so much for being on Straight Talk. And I also want to take this opportunity to let you know that my tenure here as a regular guest here on Straight Talk is coming to an end at the end of the year. And I want to thank you so much for being my guest so often over the last 16 years. It has been an honor and a privilege for me to sit here next to you. And thank you for your service to the people of Oregon.
Well, Laurel, I also want to say thank you for all that you've done to give journalism a good name. I've sat in this chair. You ask tough questions. You asked a lot of them, here today. And the fact is, Oregonians have known all these years that if you watch you taking questions and looking at various kinds of issues, they knew they'd get the straight story and they'd get the truth. And that's the coin of the realm in journalism. And thank you